When the ad for this fresh green floral summery linen top appeared on my Facebook page, I knew I had to recreate it in polymer clay. For the base layer, I used a sheet of white Primo rolled to a number 3 on the pasta machine. For the top layer, I'm using Sculpey 3 Pale Pistachio. Now, you can use the new Sculpey Soufflé Pistachio, and you might not need the white layer, but because of the brittleness of Sculpey 3, I wanted a little strength, so I'm using the Primo as my base. I rolled the pistachio clay to a number 4, and then I cut it and placed it on top and smoothed it out to try to get rid of those air bubbles. Since the inspiration fabric is a linen type fabric, I wanted to add that background texture to my sheet of clay. I didn't have a linen background stamp, so I chose to use a piece of fabric. The closest I had was actually this cheesecloth, and I just placed it over the sheet of clay and then used my roller to impress the details, the texture, into the clay sheet. Then when you remove it, you've got a real soft, subtle linen type effect. You can put it back if you want a little more and adjust it as you need. My next step was to roll another sheet of white Primo to a number 4 on the pasta machine, and then to silkscreen. I'm using the Coming Up Roses silkscreen from Create Along and a navy blue acrylic paint. I silkscreened 3 of the roses. It's okay if some of them extend off because I'm not going to use the entire piece of each rose on the background. Once I had my 3 roses, I just set that aside and I'm going to let that paint dry. And now I'll begin my background layers. For the first effect, again, I'm trying to mimic that fabric, so I chose stamps that were similar in design to the design on the fabric. This is a fern stamp, and I'm going to be stamping with the same dark blue, navy blue acrylic paint. I just placed some of that dark blue paint onto a foam brush and then use that brush to sort of dab the paint onto the stamp. That way it doesn't saturate it to the point where it gets in all the details of the stamp. I repeated that step several times to add more ferns, allowing some of them to extend off of the edges. Next, I'm using this branch or sort of vine stamp and the same navy blue paint to add this detail. Now you could also use a ball stylus and just sort of draw your vine on. I may do a little of that as an accent also. To mimic those clusters of flower buds or berries that are on that fabric, I used my ball stylus and the same paint just to dab on some little clusters. While that paint was drying, I used my craft knife to cut out around the 3 silk-screened rose images on the white clay sheet. To add a bit more dimension to the overall veneer, for the dark navy blue flowers, I used a sheet of navy blue clay rolled out to a setting 2 on my pasta machine, and I'm going to use the Tudor Rose Deco Disc to add a raised rose image to that sheet. Now, when you use the deco discs, you do want to use a release agent. You can use cornstarch, or you can even use mica powder, or you can use water, which is what I find is easiest. I just dip it into my water and then place it onto the clay sheet and give it a firm amount of pressure to transfer the image to the clay. I just used a paper towel to blot away any of the extra water, and there is your great raised image. I did repeat and make 3 of these also. I cut each one out using the craft knife and set it aside. Now you'll notice that my inspiration fabric has some larger white flowers on the background with the blue detailing on top. And to do that, I'm using the Flower Festival silkscreen from Create Along and white acrylic paint. I'm going to randomly silkscreen one of the flowers onto the background and allow it to overlap some of those stamped images. To mimic the white leaf clusters on the original fabric, I'm using a leaf rubber stamp and again the white acrylic paint to add those to the veneer. I'll be adding the blue detailing to the white areas in 2 different ways. For the leaves, I'm going to use a dark blue ink pad and the same leaf stamp that I used originally and just overstamp the white areas with the blue ink. For the silk screened flowers, I'm using the same silk screen. I chose the same flower from that silk screen and sort of offset it a little bit over the white screened flowers. And it doesn't have to be perfect because this is sort of a collage effect overall. And then silk screened with the navy blue paint. Once the paint was dry, it's time to start arranging the flowers, the dimensional flowers, on the silk screened background. I wanted to add a bit of that same texture to my large white-based flowers, and I'm using the same cheesecloth to do that, and just placed it on and gave it a quick rub and used my fingers just to transfer a little bit of that texture. I want it all to have that fabric feel when it's done. Then I just decided how I wanted to arrange them over the background layers. To highlight the raised floral design on the navy blue flowers, I'm using some white frost metallic luster from DecoArt, and I'm just going to apply it with my fingertip over the surface to highlight the details. I decided that these navy blue flowers were a little larger than I wanted, as I didn't want to hide all that background. So I'm using the smallest cutter from the Imperial clay cutter set from Create Along and cutting out just the centers of those flowers. Then I added those over the surface. I allowed them to overlap the white ones a little bit, again for the layered and dimensional look and to mimic that original fabric. Just to add a little more final detail and dimension, I'm using my pearlized hot fix cabochons from Create Along to fill in some of the blank spaces just here and there. They are hot fix. You can just place them on and press them in place and they will fuse to the clay when baking. And now it's ready to be made into polymer trading coins or jewelry or to cover a box. However I decide I want to use this beautiful veneer. I'm pretty happy with how well it matches the original inspiration fabric. Join us on the Polymer Clay Tribe Facebook page for lots of inspiration and share your work. Need more inspiration? Check out the PolymerClayTV blog for tons of creative ideas.